Welcome, everyone, to the Firing Command podcast. On today's episode, we have the privilege to interview Ben Leonard. Ben is the founder of B-Skier. He built his business on a laptop in a cupboard in his spare time, and he successfully grew and exited his business after 3 years for seven figures. Welcome to the show, Ben. What's going on?
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, first things first, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure, yeah. So most of your listeners, I'm guessing, are in the States, and I'm across the pond over in Scotland, representing the UK on the podcast today. Um, I got started in e-commerce in 2016. My background was not business. Um, I worked in ecology. My background was that I was a professional whale and dolphin nerd. It was I'm from a small city in northeast Scotland called Aberdeen, which is like the oil and gas capital of Europe. And my job was to help oil companies stay within the environmental regulations. And I liked my job. It was good. Um, but late 2015, early 2016, like a lot of people, a significant life event can change the course of their career, and that happened to me. I got pretty ill with a heart problem, and the doctors, it was like the third time I'd had it, and we really needed to nip it in the bud before it became a long-term issue. And I'm absolutely fine now, thanks to what we did, which was I took 9 months of pretty strong drugs, and I had to stop all my physical hobbies like CrossFit, boxing, lifting heavy weights, running around like a maniac. And what happened was I needed something to occupy my time and my mind. And so I started working on this brand of fitness equipment called Beast Gear. And as luck would have it, I was actually pretty good at it. And after a couple of years, I quit my job. And after 3.5 years, I'd grown it to about 4 million British pounds a year, whatever that is in US dollars. And it became time to sell, and I sold. And I'm still in e-commerce now with a variety of roles. And it's a great space to be in.
Very nice, very nice.
So Ben, as you were growing your company on the side, were you working full time? Did you have a full time day job? Did you work full time in the e-commerce, and how did you split that?
Yeah, it was a busy time when I started. My wife, she was then my girlfriend. She was studying, so she was super busy, which meant I had lots of time to work on this side hustle. Right, I was still working my full-time job as an environmental consultant, which I enjoyed, and evenings and weekends uh, I used to call this learning by doing with my business because I had no background in e-commerce, right? But actually, looking back, is a little bit better than that because I have a background in science. In science, we come up with a hypothesis, we test it, we analyze the results, and we tweak something, and then we test something, and we go again. And it was that analytical scientific background that helped me to get going pretty quickly with e-commerce by trying something, testing, analyzing it, tweaking, and going again. And so, yeah, my evenings and weekends, that's what I was doing, on a laptop in a cupboard in my apartment at the time, working hard to develop this brand, learning about my own D2C website, which I built in Shopify, and learning about Amazon, and learning about branding, and developing a range of products for fitness enthusiasts, and building that out right across Europe.
Very nice. So, obviously, the show is called Firing the Man, and we talk a lot about exiting your day job and pursuing e-commerce full time.
Sure.
When Ken and I started the podcast, we both had full time jobs, and we have kind of documented that process to both of us firing the man. So, can you walk us through, like, what is going on uh, during the time when you have your side hustle, you're starting to grow that, but you
Yeah.
also have that steady paycheck coming in.
Yeah.
What's going through Ben's mind at that time?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, isn't it? Because you're kind of caught in two worlds. Because I enjoyed my job, and I was passionate about it. But at the same time, I was really starting to figure out, hey, I'm really enjoying this side hustle, this hobby that was supposed to just give me something to do, maybe earn me some extra pocket money on the side, is actually, whoa, look at those numbers, look at all those sales coming through on Amazon and on Shopify. I didn't expect that to happen. Well, this is exciting. So, on the one hand, it's great because you have the steady income coming in, so you don't need to worry too much about taking any bit money out of your new business, which is great because it helps you to scale it. But on the other hand, the rest of your life goes out the window because all your time is either working your job or working your new business. And that was fine for a period of time when my wife was studying, but after that, it started to get into the way of life balance, and eventually it just grew to the point that it wasn't sustainable. You're on the phone at 3 a.m. crying down the phone to Amazon seller support, and yet you've got to be up in the morning to go do your normal job, and you're trying to do all your usual life things, whether it's hobbies or just doing the shopping, right? And so there comes a time when you hit a tipping point and you have to start thinking about quitting your job.
Yeah, for sure. So Ben, you mentioned it a little bit earlier about your kind of your education and your background in science, and kind of, I think it's interesting how you kind of marry that up with your side hustle, right? Like you mentioned that process of trial and error, trying to study things and figure them out. Can you kind of describe it, like how you use that in your business? Did you do it with product development? Did you do it with the business side of things, or everything?
Yeah, well, I guess pretty much everything. So like product development would be, because I was never in a hurry, never in a rush, because I when I started this out, it was purely supposed to be a hobby, and I didn't have the intention to quit my job in the first instance until this started to really gain traction. I was able to take my time, so I would develop a product sample, test it myself. I had friends who were athletes, some of them professionals, just because I was fortunate to go in those circles, and we would test them and say, well, this component could be tweaked in this way, or let's see what we can do with this. And so that was one side of it, the product development. But then you have like the kind of the tactics online. So for instance, PPC, I knew nothing about PPC when I started Amazon PPC, so that was all one big experiment, and I got really, really good at that. With about a year and a half before I sold the business, I ended up outsourcing that. The only reason I outsourced it wasn't because I wasn't doing a good job. It's just because I didn't have capacity anymore. I had to get it off my plate. I had to be working on the business and not in the business. But yeah, like the scientific approach really helped. It was almost like every facet of the business, whether it was product development or PPC or Facebook ads for driving traffic to my own website. Copy, what copy works? Let's take a look at it. Let's analyze the conversion rate when we change this, that, or the next thing, whether it's your title or your bullets or your description, all sorts of things. I think taking an analytical approach to business really works, because there comes a point where you really have to stop relying on emotions and start relying on data.
Absolutely. I think it's really neat. Amazon and e-commerce in general tends to kind of be a melting pot of people in terms of backgrounds. So for instance, like my background was accounting. Everyone I worked with was an accounting major. And so it's kind of like the same type of person. But, Ken's a network engineer. You had a background in science. And I have met people from all walks of life. And I think that's really neat. Now, I know some of our listeners don't have like that typical business background where maybe they were an accounting major, a finance major. They didn't get an MBA, but they do have, you were talking about like testing, like setting a hypothesis and testing. So what advice would you give to, say, like a non-traditional background person who's involved in business?
In terms of what, science or how, what do you mean specifically?
Yeah, I would imagine that there is a scientist listening to this right now.
Okay, sure.
And they're probably sitting on the sidelines saying, I don't know I don't know anything about business. It's not my background.
Got it.
What would you tell that person?
Got it. So you know what? Not even just scientists, but anyone, right? So everyone's got a particular set of skills, and there'll be people listening who are like, "Oh, no, I don't." It's like, well, yes, you do. Everybody does, right? And if you think about what you're good at, how can you look at your business through that lens? So if you're really, really awesome at data, how can you apply those skills to your business to give you the edge over everybody else? Or if you're really good at brand, or you're really creative, look at your business through that lens and think about, well, what can I do with my creative skill set, or maybe you're amazing at writing, your writing skill set, and how can you apply that to your business to make it better? And then the stuff that you're not so good at. So I was good at the kind of analytical side, right? but there were plenty of things that I wasn't so good at. I would get them off my plate and outsource them. So if you were really creative, you kick ass at the creative stuff, get the data stuff, the nerdy stuff, the number stuff, and get rid of that, right? Does that make sense? So like everybody's got skills. Look at your business through the lens of your skill set.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So Ben, I really want to get into kind of the exit from B Skier. But before we pivot and go in there, for the listeners that are kind of like, they're selling, and maybe they've been selling on Amazon for a year, maybe 2 years, and they're kind of like, they're at that tipping point of like, hey, I want to go full time. They have those fears. This is a 2-part question. So one, did you wish you would have went full time sooner? And do you have any regrets of not doing that?
Yeah, definitely. It's a good question. So I was held, yes, I wish I'd gone full time sooner, because what held me back from going full time sooner was security, right? I wanted to make sure that me and my family were secure. I had a good job, and it felt like it was funny because I went to had two university degrees that contributed to me getting that job, and it felt kind of weird that I just started like developing some stuff that I felt like I had no right to develop because I had no official education in e-commerce or fitness or product development, and suddenly it was earning more than my job, and therefore it felt kind of strange, almost as if like I was an imposter and I didn't have the right to be doing that full time. And then there was the security side, and I wanted to make sure that my family was secure, and I was slightly risk averse. And as I've kind of grown into my entrepreneurial shoes, I guess, I think we as entrepreneurs are risk takers. So I've begun to take more risks. And there came a day where I felt like I'd fully grown into my entrepreneur shoes, and I was ready to take that risk. And I came to realize that the biggest risk was actually not quitting my job and not fulfilling the potential of the business and my new skills. Because realistically, I was perfectly employable. And if it didn't work out after a year or two, I could go back and get a job. As it turned out, my boss was amazing. She knew I was doing this as a side thing, right? It had nothing to do with my day job. So she knew it wasn't a competitive interest. And I went to her and I said, I've been doing this Beast Gear stuff. I really need to give this a shot full time. And she said, hold that thought. Don't quit. I'm going to give you a year off. I'm going to give you a year's sabbatical. And hopefully I'll never see you again because it's going to go so well for you. But if it doesn't, you've got your job back. So she was basically the best boss in the world. And not everyone has that. Of course, I understand that. But having said that, I didn't know she was going to do that. I was in her office ready to quit. And she very kindly gave me that safety net, which was incredible. But I wish I'd done that 6 months earlier, because realistically, financially, we could have easily afforded it, maybe even a year earlier. But I hadn't grown into those entrepreneurial shoes fully yet, and I didn't have that quite that risk-taking mindset yet. But I got to give myself a break for that, to be honest.
Sure. Yeah, that's interesting. And Ben, that is the common answer we hear a lot is of entrepreneurs that are full time now. They wish they would have done it earlier. But I think you said it perfectly, like where you have to feel comfortable and you have to kind of grow into your entrepreneurial shoes, and fit that space. But yeah, it's a common answer is not going quick enough, or soon enough.
So one last thing that I want to ask before we dive into your exit is, what is going through your mind as you're walking into the office to quit your job? Was it confidence? Were you nervous? What is going through your mind on that day?
I was calm and relaxed because I had a great relationship with my boss. And I was confident because I knew that she was a good person. But at the same time, it's never a good feeling, or it's not, that's the wrong phrase. It's never a comfortable feeling to know that you're about to quit your job. So it was like uncomfortable excitement. I suppose the word for that is anxiety, maybe, but I was like excited because I knew that within however long the meeting was, half an hour, like that was it. I was going to be doing this full time. Okay, I was going to have a notice period, but you know what I mean, right? That was it. It was going to be off my chest. And I think if I'd been going into face like the worst boss in the world, that would have sucked. but it was a mixture of anxiety and excitement. But it was, overall that I knew I was doing the right things. So I think overall it was the feelings, whatever they were, it's hard to describe them, were overwhelmingly positive, I guess.
Very nice. I would say that is very similar to Ken and I. At least I can speak for myself on that one. It is, yeah, I was excited, but I was nervous. And I think we've talked about it on the show before, is waiting to fire the man until the discomfort leaves. And the discomfort doesn't leave. It's there always.
No, it will be there.
Yeah.
I love that phrase. Yeah.
I think that holds a lot of people in a job for longer than they need to be. But it's really cool to hear your story and kind of your mindset going into this. So let's dive into this exit. So you've got B Skier. You've grown it to do 4 million British pounds. Let's start at the beginning. Did somebody approach you? Did you put it up for sale? How did that go?
Sure. In early 2019, I came to the decision that I needed to start thinking about selling, because so much of the business was tied up in one sales channel, Amazon. Now, albeit that was across multiple countries, all across Europe, the Middle East, Australia, but still, ultimately, you heard the horror stories. Somebody could just press the big red button. And sure, I'd built a legitimate brand and a significant portion of customers would come and find me on my website, but it would not have been a good day if that had happened. And I got some advice. I got this advice from my dad, actually, which was sell the business at the point of peak romance. And what that means is basically you're at the point where you're thinking to yourself, wow, this could be huge. But also, it might not be huge, right? You got this romantic notion that it could be huge, but it might not be huge. But you're experiencing that growth that is demonstrating that, yes, this could be huge. So there's like a carrot on a stick for a potential buyer. Like, this could be huge. Like, this is on a great growth trajectory. There's lots of meat left on the bone here. So you're going to get a decent valuation. And so what happens is, if you sell at the point of peak romance, if it goes great after you've sold, wonderful. If there's a bit of an earnout potentially in the deal structure, depending on how it's done, then wonderful, you're going to hit those targets. If it doesn't go great, then you got out at the right time. As it happened, I sold, and then COVID came along, which actually dramatically increased sales of fitness equipment. But at no point did I regret selling when I sold. It was the right thing for me and my family. My wife was pregnant. We wanted to move house. I was, 30, 31. It just made sense. And maybe if B Skier wasn't my first business, if I already had an exit or two under my belt and I had that financial safety net, then maybe I would have wanted to stick around and experience the romantic ride of where the brand might go, right? But it wasn't the right thing at the time, and so I came to the decision to start planning to sell in early 2019, and I approached a broker. Now you got to remember that in 2019, early 2019 even, this whole buying and selling e-commerce business thing that has exploded in the last year and a half didn't exist yet. No one had heard of Thrasio. They formed in September 2018. So I approached a broker in early 2019, and they were all right, but several things kind of went wrong during the process. And so it took a lot longer than I planned for them to get the business ready. And actually, it was myself and the accountant that did a lot more of the work. Which is why in the end, I was able to negotiate them down on their commission. But they ultimately did introduce me to the buyer. And the buyer took a look at my business, gave me an LOI, a letter of intent, for those listening, which is basically a letter that says, we intend to buy your business. Please give us X number of days, 30, 45 days, to do our due diligence. They did their due diligence. And at the end of October 2019, I sold the business.
So Ben, so you approached a broker, and then that was about a 30 or 45 day period for due diligence, and then just immediately after that it was closed, or was there anything further than that? And also, can you describe kind of like your feelings, like what was what was going on in your life like at that point?
Absolutely. In time? I mean, it was crazy, because it was early 2019. I came to realize, wow, I could take a lot of money off the table here. And I approached the broker and I was quite excited about it. But they took a long time. So, I think I contacted them in February or March, and that we weren't approaching potential buyers until September. They took quite a long time. By the time the business was ready to go to market, so to speak, it was early September 2019. It was a crazy time in my life. Our daughter was born in April. And because of all the delays with the broker, I was hoping that this deal would have been done and dusted. But my wife and I had arranged to go backpacking around northern Italy, traveling around on the Italian rail system with our 5-month-old daughter. And we went ahead and did it. So we're like walking through the streets of Venice during the day, and in the evenings I'm on calls with like every different person from the department of this potential buyer. And this went on for like our 3-week trip around Italy, which was kind of hilarious. My wife was not too impressed, but I was saying, listen, if we pull this off, we're going to have a good amount of money. So like, let's just, let me get on with this. I mean, we still had a great holiday. It was good fun. And then, so we got home, in October, and they finished their due diligence. And then there's the next part after they've done the due diligence is the legal stuff, right? So I had a legal representative back and forth with their legal team on the SPA, the share purchase agreement. So one of the things I wanted to do was I wanted to sell the whole entity, the limited company, rather than the assets, which would just have been the brand. And the reason for that, and this is common among people in the UK, is that we have something called entrepreneurs relief, which is basically a tax relief to encourage entrepreneurs to grow businesses in the UK to boost the economy. And instead of paying 20% tax on the sale, you only pay 10% tax on the sale, up to a particular threshold, up to £10 million. So you could do this, you could repeat this until you've made £10 million selling businesses. Now, the new government has just changed that threshold to, I think, £1 million. But nonetheless, when I sold it, the threshold was 10. So I was going to be fine because I wasn't selling for 10. And so, I wanted to sell the limited company, which was not common at that time for American buyers. I sold the business to an American organization. I can say who it is, it's Thrasio. And it wasn't common for an American organization to buy a British company. They would typically just buy the assets. But I was like, well, I want to sell the company so that I can get this tax relief. So that made the process last a little longer because their lawyers weren't used to it. And so we had to just kind of iron out a few bits and pieces, which took a bit longer, which made me like a little bit more nervous because, you're adding on several more weeks to the process. You're now dealing with things that people aren't necessarily comfortable with because they haven't done it before. But in the end, it all worked out fine. And the deal was done at the end of October 2019. And that was pretty surreal, to wake up the next morning and you don't own the business anymore.
I want to dive into that a little bit more. Having never gone through an exit, I would anticipate a little bit of sadness. I have spent so much time with my brand. It is like a child. You know what I mean? The thousands and thousands of hours. So what was that like? I mean, did you get cold feet? What were your emotions there?
I didn't get cold feet. On the one hand, there was a sense of relief because it was intense. It was intense. And of course, and it needs to be intense and it should be intense. Somebody is going to give you a lot of money for your business. They need to know every single teeny tiny detail, and due diligence is pretty intense. So I was relieved that it was done. And on the other hand, there was this tinge of sadness that I didn't own it anymore. But on the other hand, I was the founder. I will always be the founder, right? I'll always be that guy. And if the brand continues to go in the right direction, that will be a pretty cool thing to always be the founder. And I was also able to negotiate on the side of the deal a side agreement whereby I would have involvement in the development of products, which was one of the aspects of the business that I enjoyed the most. So that was great. And that's something that I help people do with now with my brokerage, that type of thing. And so that was fantastic. I felt like I still was almost like having my cake and eating it. I still got to do the fun bit. And it was also excitement. There was a sense of excitement about where I could see the brand going. And then, of course, the financial side. I was waiting for the first chunk of money to hit my bank account. so that I could take a screenshot of it, because I was never ever going to have that amount of money in my bank. It was a roller coaster of emotions.
So Ben, so you sold B Skier to Thrasio, and then yeah, can you describe kind of what's next? You had mentioned, you alluded to it, that you're kind of waiting for the screenshots. So maybe if you can go into a little bit of the details, like maybe it's earn out or payout or whatever, and then
Sure.
and then kind of what you spent your time on after that, because obviously you worked full time building B Skier, and now it's gone. Then what do you do then?
Sure. So I can't go into too much detail on the specifics of the deal, obviously for contractual reasons, but yes, there was an earnout. So I received an amount up front, and then an amount depending on the performance of the business over the next couple of years. And I was very comfortable with those targets because I'd negotiated on those, and I knew the business well, and I knew the trajectory we were on, and I knew that we were very likely to hit those. So that was great. And so the money came along, and I had a bit of a break, a bit of a breather from really doing very much of anything. We had a new daughter, and we just moved house, and so it was time to just have a break. I was helping, when you sell a business, there is a transition period where you're going to kind of onboard the new owners to the business, but it's nothing particularly strenuous. And I began to think about my new projects and what I was going to do with myself. At one point, I even considered going back to my old job, which I think I thought about for about half a day, and then thought, that's a stupid idea. I have all these new skill sets. Why would I do that? I liked my job, but I don't want a job, right? And, I realized that I have developed the ability to build a valuable asset that is a brand and then sell it. So I'm doing three things now, really. I guess I have three hats. I'm developing brands, partly because I love it, partly because I like I said, I now know how to develop a brand into something valuable and then sell it, and partly because I can't do my other two things properly without still running e-commerce businesses. So I consult with e-commerce business owners, and I run a brokerage called Ecom Brokers, and I can't properly advise people if I am not in the trenches on the ground with a real lived understanding of e-commerce. And I believe that I couldn't even do it properly if I said, oh, well, I owned an e-commerce business and I sold it. Well, that's fine, but this industry is moving so fast that even now, a couple year and a half later, things have changed. And it's not good enough to just have had that lived experience in the past. You need to have that lived experience now of owning and running an e-commerce business. So those are my three hats. I build brands. I consult with e-commerce business owners. Just the benefit of my experience to help them get control of their business and scale it up. There's no magic potion. There's no secret sauce. There's no super duper course that's gonna turn their business into something amazing overnight. There's no pictures of me standing in front of a Lamborghini on Facebook. And then there's the brokerage, which takes the lessons that I learned from selling my business, and I partnered with my accountant, who played a significant role in selling that business, and she's got like 20 years experience in mergers and acquisitions. And so we decided that we felt like we could do a better job of being a broker. And our position in the UK and Europe is quite an interesting one, considering now the huge growth of e-commerce this side of the Atlantic. We're working globally, but it's quite interesting because there's like a lot of buyers in the States buying up businesses our side of the Atlantic, and vice versa. There are an emerging number of buyers this side of the pond buying up businesses over there. So it's an interesting place to be.
Very nice. I think that when you talked about running your own e-commerce business and that making you a successful consultant, I wish more people in the industry had that attitude. That makes so much sense. Going back to like academia, I always had a lot more respect for professors that had real world experience. And with Amazon changing as much as it does, it is, if you were an expert 2 years ago, and were to only bring that skill set to the table as a consultant, the atmosphere has changed so much in just 2 short years. So I really like that and respect that. And if some
Thanks.
of our listeners have an existing brand, um, like specifically what type of consulting do you do, or where do you find your expertise to be?
Yeah. So what I don't do is I don't run people's accounts. So I don't get in there and open their account and do the nitty gritty of that side of things. It's more the strategy. And that's on everything from the product development to the logistical side to branding of your specific products and your overall brand and marketing those products. It's the whole, because I managed my business on my own, except for three, freelance team members who were doing customer service and social media. So I teach the strategies that I use to build, scale, and then sell my business, and provide, I guess, my point of view on what they're doing to help them get clear on where are you now, where do you want to be, right? You need a reference point of where you are now. You need a reference point of what is your plan, where are you trying to go? Then you can reverse engineer that, figure out how you're going to do it, and I help people do that, and that gives them a sense of control, because e-commerce is so overwhelming. And I think the reason it's so overwhelming is because we live in an age where so much information is available online, whether it's YouTube or podcasts or Facebook groups, and everybody is shouting that they are correct. I'm right. No, I'm right. No, I'm right. It's overwhelming. You don't know what to do. And sometimes you just need one point of reference. And if it's somebody who's been there and done it, then that helps quite a lot. So that's what I do.
Very nice. Ken, anything else before we get into the fire round?
No, yeah, I would just like, to add on to what David said, Ben, is like, I really respect the fact that you're, building brands, and kind of staying in the game while you're advising and doing the broker side of it. I think that marries really well, and I think it adds a ton of value to your clients. So kudos to
Thanks.
you.
Yeah, I think just to add one other thing, I mentioned to David a second ago, the whole idea of having a map. And that applies as well to people when they want to think about their business in terms of the exit. So there'll be people who are listening who are thinking, yeah, I might want to exit. And there'll be people who are listening like, oh, no, I never want to exit. I love my business. I just want to keep hold of it. Both of those things are fine. But the worst thing you can do is wake up one morning and say, I want to sell my business. Can't do that. Well, you can, but it's a mistake. What you want to do is wake up one morning and say, now I'm going to plan how to sell my business. Because even if you don't want to sell it, you need to understand, well, what is it worth, right? People regularly have their houses valued, or more or less what your car is worth based on depreciation, right? Depending on when you bought it. You really need to have a handle on what is your business worth. So it's important to have your business valued by somebody competent to value it, and then say to yourself, okay, it's worth, is it worth $500,000? Is it worth 100 grand? Is it worth $1 million? Is it worth 10 million? Doesn't matter. And then ask yourself, well, what am I willing to sell that for? Or am I willing to sell it at all? And then reverse engineer that and think about the steps that are going to get you there, and work with somebody who can help you to break that down, stack up the dominoes, and get to that point. And there are some people who will just wake up and say, I want to sell my business. And then they'll go to one of the standard kind of flipper style brokers and slap it on the website like the eBay of businesses, and you won't realize what it's really worth. What you need to do is have a plan.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And in terms of the value, any recommendations on, if someone is wondering what their business is worth, any back of the napkin math or multiples that you would recommend, or do you think going through a valuation practitioner is the way to go?
Getting it valued is the way to go, and you can get it done by a professional pretty quickly. And so we can do that. ecombrokers.co.uk if you want that, and we can figure out what it's worth, and then either work with you towards a goal, or sell it now, or sell it very soon, depending on what your goals are, or not at all. On the other hand, there is a back of a napkin way to do this, but I don't particularly recommend that people do. But when we're talking about multiples, the question is multiple of what? So different people will have different definitions of that, but the multiple really ought to be the trailing 12 months SDE, which stands for seller's discretionary earnings. So what is seller's discretionary earnings? That is basically your net income plus add backs. What are add backs? I hear you ask. Add backs are, in layman's terms, are effectively costs associated. So costs that appear in your profit and loss sheet, which you can add back because the new owner won't have those costs. So that could be your salary, could be any other expenses you're putting through the business, like your phone bill, but it could also be costs that you've paid for that the new owner is never going to have to pay for again. So the cost of doing the trademarks, well, you've already done them. The cost of your product photography, well, you've already done it. The cost of that consultant that you hired, you're not going to be paying him anymore. The cost of your virtual team, no, the new owner has their own team, right? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you need to get it valued by somebody who is competent to actually calculate what all these add backs are. And there are a lot of them, and there are lots of things that can be done by a competent e-commerce accountant to do that. So then once you've figured out your seller's discretionary earnings, you need to think about what kind of multiple you're going to get. And there's a range, right? So this exists on a spectrum, but say you had an SDE of 100 grand and your business was 2 years old and it was pretty well diversified and it was growing, probably going to get between 3 and 3.5x, although it's going up all the time at the moment. But if your business is 5 years old and your SDE is 500 grand and you got massive off Amazon sales on your own D2C website and you got lots of intellectual property and enormous growth, could be 4 or 5.5x the way things are going. So it's important to recognize that it exists on a spectrum, and the problem that business owners have is they're very emotionally tied to their business and they're quite likely to overvalue it. So it's important to get somebody impartial to take a look. And we can do that if you want.
That makes a lot of sense. Do you have, I always like, whenever I'm talking to a broker, I always like to ask them this. If you look at like traditional private equity companies that are buying brick and mortar, like manufacturing, typically that's going to trade somewhere between like 6 and 7 times EBITDA, which for purposes of this conversation is very similar to SDE.
Sure.
Aside from physical assets on your balance sheet, there does not seem to be a huge difference, in my opinion, between, say, a manufacturing company and an e-commerce company. But there's a big disparity between multiples. And what's your opinion on why that is?
It's multifaceted. Part of it is to do with the risk tied up in the fact that significant portions of the revenue are coming from marketplaces like Amazon, which have ownership of the customer and which could suspend you at any time. Although that risk diminishes with the age of your business, how mature your account is, and of course, whether you're playing by the rules, which you, of course, should be. Part of it is because of the hesitance of banks, essentially, to lend money for the purchase of e-commerce businesses, which comes back to that risk. Part of it is simply the age of this, right? Until relatively recently, the last few years, nobody was buying and selling e-commerce businesses particularly commonly, or at least people were not raising enormous sums of money in order to do so. But since the emergence of Thrasio in late 2018, this has exploded with the emergence of more of these venture capitalist aggregators, if you want to call them that. There's more competition, there's more buyers, and therefore multiples are getting pushed up. And we are starting to see businesses go for higher and higher multiples, which is a good thing, because these businesses are legitimate businesses. The internet has existed for decades. We've been buying and selling products online for decades. It is simply unfair. It is wrong that somebody can pour their blood, sweat, and tears into a business and will not realize the same value as something purely because it doesn't have a door and a roof.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I'm with you there. And from a cash flow standpoint, cash flow is cash flow. And and so I am looking forward to multiples continuing to climb. And I think that an increased supply of buyers is going to hopefully continue to push those up. So anyway, Ken, let's dive into the fire round.
Yeah. Real quick before the fire round, Ben, one more question. Since you're in the broker space and you see a lot of things and hear a lot of things, what's one kind of prediction for the next 6 months? Where do you see the market going, or is there going to be any shockers? Or
multiples are going to continue to go up, but I don't think that they're going to go up astronomically. I think that we're this is that they're definitely not going to go above traditional multiples, and we're reaching I think a plateau in that point of view. In terms of the space in general, many of these aggregators have raised their money. Some of them are raising more, but by and large, they've raised a lot of money, and now they need to spend it, and they want to spend it fast. So if you're thinking about selling, I would want to get the balls rolling, because getting deals done before Q4 would be smart. I think this is going to go in waves. So people are going to raise money, spend a ton of money, raise some more money, spend a ton of money, and I don't see this like a dot-com bubble that's going to burst in that sense.
Okay, no, that's awesome. All right, let's hit up the fire round. Ben, are you ready?
I am ready.
All right, what is your favorite book?
Can I give you a business one and a non-business one?
Absolutely.
Cool. Business, The E-Myth Revisited by Michael E. Gerber. Non-business, Harry Potter. I am a Harry Potter nerd, and I'm proud.
That's awesome. Heck yeah. What are your hobbies?
Fitness and music.
What do you think sets apart successful e-commerce entrepreneurs from those who give up, fail, or never get started?
We have grit and determination.
Excellent.
We take risks. Like I said at the start, right? I didn't used to take risks. I had to learn to take risks. I've come to realize now the biggest risk, if you risk nothing, you risk everything, right? If you don't do anything, well, all you're going to see is downside because you haven't tried.
I really like that. And oftentimes when people do identify that downside, it's not that bad. I don't know how it is in the UK, but
no,
you're
completely right. What is the risk? What is the consequence? And can you live with that?
Worst case scenario, you go bankrupt, and they don't, at least in the US, they don't put you in jail for filing bankruptcy. You get to start over. And it's hard to get a credit card for a couple of years, but it's really, downside's not that bad. So I like that grit and determination. So last question, how can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, sure. I'm on all the main social media channels. My handle is Ben Leonard Pro, Leonard Leonard, like the golfer, Justin Leonard, Ben Leonard Pro. If you want to have a conversation about either selling your business or even just, thinking about, well, what's it worth? Head over to ecombrokers.co.uk, click on the big yellow button that says sell your business. And if you want to take a look at my website, that's benleonard.pro.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast, and look forward to connecting again soon.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Thanks, Ben.
Cheers, guys.